Hello, my name is Miriam Paley-Waldman, and today I'm going to talk about something that we all have in common. We're all consumers. Even those of us who pay little attention to the name brands we buy are still identifiable by what we choose to wear. Our role in the fashion industry is indisputable, and the trends around us shape how and where we buy. No, I'm not the first person to recognize this, for the fashion industry seems to be aware of our moves before we make them. When a well-known celebrity is photographed for their street style, or a social media post goes viral, I can say with almost absolute certainty that the pieces of clothing these people are wearing will be available from mass market retailers the next following days at a fraction of the original price. And this practice is a fairly new manifestation of a much larger and uglier network that happens behind the scenes. Today, I'm going to talk about the phenomenon of fast fashion, which is a globalized market that seemingly leaves no winners. Why do we buy? Well, the average American purchases 68 garments of clothing a year and throws away 70 pounds of clothing in that same time period. British studies show that these garments are likely to be worn only 7 times before being tossed, and these numbers are actually high compared to Chinese studies that reveal that the average Chinese consumer only wears a garment 3 times. These numbers seem ridiculous, of course, but as seen from an in-house study from Forever 21, products are only made and tested to survive 10 washes. The $12 billion fashion industry is taking advantage of everyone on the supply chain, and this is from garment manufacturers to us as consumers. Still, American families spend $1,700 on clothing each year. This number seems large, and so do the numbers of clothing that we rack up annually, but this is only 3.5% of the average American family's expenses. This is a radical difference from in the 1970s when the average family's expenses allotted 10% to spend on clothing. What we're doing here is we're buying more and spending less, but while the cost for us might be cheap, someone is still ultimately paying the price. It might be hard for some of you to believe that this system came about a lot quicker than you might assume. In the 1970s, about 70% of clothing was American-made, and this meant that we knew where our clothing was coming from and that we could put in laws in place to ensure that there were safe working conditions and that workers could unionize. In 2012, however, this number was only 2.5% of domestically made product. In the 90s, large fashion companies outsourced labor to other countries to avoid strict labor laws put in place, regulating environmental practices and workers' rights. Thus, a switch happened, and the fashion industry became globalized. But the effects are still not spread equally. The fashion industry currently employs 1 in 5 people in the world. In Bangladesh, this industry employs 4.5 million people, many of whom are women. Fewer than 2% of these women can earn a living wage, according to the International Labor Rights Forum. These women are thus trapped in unsafe and unfulfilling jobs that pay an average 33 cents an hour. Catastrophic factory fires and building collapses are frequent in these unregulated areas, and more than 500 people have died from largely preventable tragedies, and these are numbers we have record of in a system that benefits off keeping workers invisible. An issue on top of this is how quickly we're going through this clothing that we're buying. Because of the incredible amounts of clothing that is donated to secondhand retailers, not all of it can be housed, let alone sold. Cheaply made and unwearable clothing is sent in mass amounts to the global south each year. In Ghana, a 30-foot tall mountain of rotting garments from places like H&M and Zara, huge fast fashion retailers. Clothing that has ultimately no resale value is sent abroad by secondhand dealers to pollute other countries because we don't want to deal with it. When the curtain is drawn back on the fast fashion industry, we see that the cycle both begins and ends by exploiting the global south. Clothing is made in life-threatening conditions only to return unwearable and non-biodegradable in mountains of trash. Our cheap products, once again, may seem to help our pocket, but in reality, our shopping addictions are a modern manifestation of how Western countries exploit the global South for its own benefit. Racial capitalism is a system that relies on the process of capitalizing off the racial identity of others. Fast fashion in the global market is a textbook definition of this system that is designed to harm individuals. Many Western movements have forgotten how company-owned supply chains purposefully invisibilize individuals at the bottom of the train. I see many movements that leave out important players in this losing game and focus instead on feeling good about what you buy, and not the real harm that's taking place. However, Anti-Slavery International, Clean Clothes Campaign, and the Business and Human Rights Center, to name a few, are organizations that have moved from focusing on what consumers can do to feel better to petitioning and working to replace responsibility on billionaires, like Amancio Ortega, the founder of Zara, which is one of the first and largest scale fast fashion industries that profits off the backs of others. Fast fashion companies exploit everyone on the product chain, and this is including the earth we live on. It's those consumers, there is some stuff you guys can do. Large boycotts of fashion companies that steal designs and utilize sweatshops in other countries have resulted in some, while albeit limited, change in the supply chain. They're after our dollar, which is what has led to this global phenomenon of seeking to do everything as cheaply as possible. Additionally, a lot of the issue at hand is consumer culture. Buying less of whatever it is ultimately better for your pocket, garment workers, and the global environment. Even slow locally made fashion that follows American-made guidelines still has a negative environmental effect. The best solution is to buy when necessary and with the intention to keep it for a lifetime. Shopping secondhand also seems to be a beacon of light in this otherwise dark situation because only 20% of clothing is donated or recycled, and there is still no shortage. In fact, 70% of donated clothing will never be bought or used again. What we can do is utilize the mountains of clothing that's sold secondhand, and it is likely to last even longer than what popular culture is now trying to sell us. In the past 2 years of my life, I've been fortunate enough to be able to find brands that are fair trade certified and sustainable when I do decide to shop, but this might not be an option for everyone. In preparation for my talk, I spoke to Aja Barber, who is a sustainable anti-influencer, if you will, who is an advocate for the death of consumer culture and the abolition of sweatshops. As much as we say sustainable or even secondhand clothing is way too expensive for us, most of us are more fortunate than the people who are making our clothing, living on less than $1 a day. She advocates for wearing more of what we already have and putting an end to the need for trendy pieces that stay in our closets for only months at a time. I urge you all to consider if you truly want or need all of the clothing you buy, or if it's in an effort to keep up with the ideals of consumerism that are forced down our throats by popular culture, and to make decisions to avoid supporting the giants of exploitation. Thank you. And please remember that this is one of the few harmful industries in which we have the ability to make a direct impact. Global exploitation depends on us as consumers, and our dollar has the ability to switch focus, even if it's only a t-shirt at a time. Thank you, and have a good evening. I appreciate everyone listening. Have a good night.